There's a certain kind of friend everyone relies on, but almost no one really sees. The one who gets the 2 a.m. crisis calls, the 10-minute voice notes, the "do you have a minute?" text that never lasts a minute. You know their history, their trauma, their attachment style. They barely know your favorite food. You're the one people thank with, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And somehow, you leave the conversation feeling more alone than when it started. Tonight isn't about shaming you for caring or blaming you for being good at it. It's about understanding how you became the therapist friend, why that role feels safer than being the messy one, and what it costs you to live as everyone's unofficial counselor. We'll explore parentification, fawn responses, hidden contracts in friendships, and how to move toward relationships where you're not just the container, but a person with needs too. You don't have to stop holding others to finally let yourself be held. Let's start with a scene you might know too well. You're exhausted. It's one of those evenings where your brain feels like it's walking with wet socks on, slow, heavy, vaguely miserable. You tell yourself, "Tonight I'm doing nothing." Maybe you even consider reaching out to someone, hovering over a name in your phone and then putting the phone back down. Then it buzzes. "Hey, do you have space for a call?" Your stomach drops, which you mistake for guilt, because the honest answer is no. You don't have space. You don't have anything left. But your thumbs type before you decide. Of course. 45 minutes later, you've walked them through their breakup, their spiraling anxiety, the thing their boss said that reopened an old wound. You've named patterns, softened their shame, cracked a joke right where the tension needed to break. They say, "You should honestly be a therapist." You laugh it off, hang up, stare at the dark ceiling. They go to bed soothed. You go to bed hollow. Being the therapist friend looks generous from the outside. You're patient. You're insightful. You remember details from conversations 3 months ago. But inside it's lonelier than people realize, because somewhere along the way you learned that your safest place in the group was not being in it, but orbiting around it, observing, tracking, stabilizing. Your friends think the calls are mutual because you say, "I'm always here if you need anything." What you don't say is, "I don't know how to need you back." So your life becomes a series of emotional shifts where you clock in without pay, without rest, without anyone noticing. You never clock out. You tell yourself you're just that friend. But it's more than a personality trait. It's a role you were trained into long before your contacts list got this long. If any part of you just thought, "Oh, that's me," I'd love to know in the comments. Not as data for the algorithm, though yes, that helps, but as a quiet roll call for the people who have been carrying everyone else's storms in silence. So how does someone become the therapist friend? You weren't born with a clipboard. You grew one. Often it starts in childhood. Maybe you had a parent whose feelings filled the house like fog. Their bad day became everyone's weather. You learned to read their face the way other kids learn to read books. A slammed cupboard meant stay small. A certain tone in their voice meant do something, fix something, say something that makes it better. You didn't call it emotion regulation. You called it surviving. Or maybe your home was chaotic in a different way. Addictions, financial crisis, a sibling who needed more, adults who were technically in charge but practically not okay. Someone had to be steady. Someone had to be the one who didn't fall apart. So you grew up fast, became the little advisor, the confidant, such a mature kid. That's the quiet origin story of the therapist friend. You were cast as the stabilizer before you had a self to stabilize. When you learn early that your value is in calming others, you carry that script into every room you walk into. In school, you became the one friends cried to in bathrooms. In your 20s, you held your friends' hands through breakups and burnout. At work, you're the unofficial emotional HR department. On the surface, it looks like empathy. Underneath, it's also a nervous system strategy. Your body has learned that it's safer when everyone else is okay. If they're upset, your brain reads it as a problem you have to solve, not because you're a control freak, but because historically other people's dysregulation has been dangerous for you. So you soothe them as a way to soothe your own threat system. That's the first layer. This isn't just kindness, it's survival math. Then there's the second layer, identity. If you were praised more for being so understanding than you were loved for being messy, moody, or inconvenient, you start to confuse being needed with being wanted. Being useful becomes your whole personality. You're not just someone who listens. You're the listener, the wise one, the strong one, the one who has it all figured out, even when you feel like a house held together by tape and apologies. The problem is, once people get used to you in that role, they stop looking for the rest of you. They don't ask follow-up questions when you say, "I'm okay, just tired." They accept your "it's fine" at face value because, in their minds, you are the emotional adult in the room. The therapist friend doesn't fall apart. They don't send 3-paragraph texts about how scared they are. They don't show up unglued. So now you're stuck in a loop. You don't show your needs because you're the strong one. People don't see your needs because you don't show them. Their lack of response confirms that your needs are too much, so you hide them more. There's a hidden contract running underneath your friendships, and it sounds like, "I will be infinitely understanding as long as you don't require me to be vulnerable." Not because you don't want to be vulnerable, but because you're not sure you'll survive it. Third layer, social rewards. Culture absolutely loves the therapist friend. Selfless, mature, emotionally intelligent. You're the character in the movie who gives the main character the speech that changes their life. You're the supporting role in everyone's arcs. And you do get something out of it. Not just praise, but a sense of control. If you're the one who understands everyone, you don't have to risk being the one nobody understands. If you're the safe harbor, you never have to ask, "Is there a harbor for me?" But underneath the control and competence, there's often a growing resentment that you're ashamed to feel. You might notice it in flashes. When a friend only texts you when they're spiraling. When someone calls you to process their latest crisis but forgets your birthday. When you listen for an hour and they end with, "Oh my God, I'm talking so much, how are you?" And you say, "I'm fine, don't worry." Because you suddenly feel weirdly exposed, like the spotlight isn't supposed to swing your way. Resentment is not proof that you're ungrateful or dramatic. It's the part of you that knows this arrangement is lopsided. But because you've been the understanding one for so long, resentment feels like a betrayal of your own brand. I'm not allowed to be angry. I get it. I understand why they are like this. I don't want to be unfair. So you turn resentment inward and rename it. Burnout, numbness, depression. You assume you're just bad at self-care, instead of recognizing that you're carrying 10 people's emotional weight on the back of a nervous system that never learned how to put anything down. Fourth layer, avoidance of your own story. Here's the part that stings a little. Being the therapist friend sometimes becomes a way to hide from your own unsolved pain. If your focus is always on other people's disasters, you never have to look too closely at the quiet disaster in your own chest. It's safer to analyze someone else's relationship than to sit with why you keep choosing people who never really choose you. It's easier to help a friend grieve their loss than to grieve the childhood you didn't get. You can stay busy taking notes on everyone else's lives and never have to ask, "Okay, but what do I want? What hurts in me?" And because the world keeps rewarding you for your insight, you give the best advice. I always feel better after we talk. It's very easy to mistake emotional labor for emotional health. You can be brilliant at naming patterns and still struggle to live differently. You can help others set boundaries while quietly letting people walk all over you. You can sound like a therapist and still be a very lonely kid inside. The final layer is fear. What happens if you stop performing this role? Some relationships might thin out. Some people might pull back when you stop offering free emotional consultancy at all hours. Some might get defensive when you ask for reciprocity. You've never needed this before. Your nervous system hears that as, see, you are too much. So even the idea of asking for more care, more checking in, more curiosity about your inner life, can feel like walking into a room where you're sure the answer will be no. Better to stay the therapist friend, the one with wise words and no visible needs, than risk finding out which friendships can actually hold you. That's the bind, and it's why this isn't just about learning to say no. It's about rewriting the story of who you're allowed to be in your own life. So what does it look like to gently retire from full-time unpaid therapist to being an actual friend? Not a cold withdrawal, not a personality transplant, but a shift toward mutuality. First, you name the role. Not just, I'm always there for my friends, but I've become the person people emotionally dump on, and I rarely feel seen in return. You don't have to announce this out loud yet. Just tell the truth to yourself. Give it language. I am more comfortable listening than being listened to. I feel guilty when I can't be available. I feel resentful that no one checks on me the way I check on them. Those sentences are not complaints, they're data. Second, you locate the origin with compassion, not blame. Instead of, ugh, why am I like this? Try, of course I'm like this. Of course you learn to manage other people's emotions if that's how you stayed safe. Of course you overfunction when others fall apart if chaos used to mean danger. You're not broken. You're over-practiced in one skill and under-practiced in another. Third, you experiment with very small acts of imbalance in your favor. Not a massive confrontation, not vanishing from everyone's life, just tiny reversals of the usual flow. When a friend asks how you are, you answer with one honest sentence instead of your usual, I'm fine. When you're exhausted and someone texts, do you have space? You practice replying, I really care about you, but I don't have the capacity tonight. Can we talk tomorrow? When someone vents for a long time and says, sorry, I'm talking so much, you don't immediately rush to comfort them. You let that moment breathe, and maybe you say, yeah, I'd love to share a bit too, if that's okay. These are small, but they're tectonic. Because every time you do this, you teach your nervous system something radical. Being honest about my limits does not automatically equal abandonment. Some people will adjust. They'll make more room for you. They'll be surprised maybe, but curious. Oh, I didn't realize you were going through all that. Tell me more. Those are your people. Others will treat your limits as an inconvenience or a betrayal of the role they'd quietly cast you in. That will hurt, but it will also clarify something you've probably felt in your bones for years. Being indispensable is not the same thing as being loved. Fourth, you start cultivating spaces where you're not the default therapist. Maybe that's with one friend who already feels more balanced. Maybe it's a group where you're newer and less established in the fixer role. Maybe it's an actual therapist, where for once you get to be the client. These are training grounds for a different way of being in relationships, where your value isn't measured in emotional labor but in simple presence, in being you, not the wise you, not the composed you, just you. You practice saying, I don't know, instead of offering advice. You practice crying in front of someone safe instead of turning your pain into a tidy lesson. You practice letting silence hang without rushing to fill it with comforting words. And yes, you will relapse. You will find yourself halfway through a 40-minute call thinking, I did not have capacity for this, but you said, of course, anyway. You will overspend your energy and then feel resentful. You will give advice when you were trying to just listen. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're unwinding years, maybe decades of training. In those moments, instead of beating yourself up, you can debrief with yourself gently. Okay, I slipped into old patterns. What was I afraid would happen if I said no? Where did I override my body? What might I try next time that's 5% more honest? Tiny course corrections over time are what rewrites the story. Not one big dramatic exit from everyone's life, and somewhere along the way, you may notice something quietly beautiful. The more honest you become about your limits, the richer your remaining friendships become. When you stop being the emotional service provider, you make space to be an equal. When you stop hiding your needs as if they're a problem to be solved in private, you invite the kind of intimacy you've been facilitating for everyone else. If any part of this feels like the life you're living, it might help to save this video, not as homework, but as a reminder for the nights you feel guilty for choosing rest over yet another call. If you've spent years being the therapist's friend, it can be disorienting to realize how little of you has actually been witnessed. You might grieve the time you spent being everyone's emergency contact while you went emotionally unlabeled. You might feel angry or foolish or deeply sad. All of that is allowed. But I hope you also feel a small, stubborn kind of hope, because nothing in this story says you're doomed to be a background character forever. Your empathy isn't the problem. Your insight isn't the problem. The problem is the story that says you only deserve connection if you're earning it, fixing it, managing it. You are allowed to keep the parts of you that care deeply while letting go of the parts that confuse self-erasure with love. You're allowed to become a person who can both hold others and be held, who can listen carefully and still say, I need, who can be wise and profoundly human. If you want to keep exploring these kinds of inner roles, control, guilt, numbness, the parts of you that kept you alive, feel free to subscribe. This corner of the internet is for people who are tired of living as their own case study and want to start living as themselves. From being the therapist friend to being a real one. From holding everyone together to letting someone hold you. From surviving on usefulness to being loved for simply existing.